Hello, this is Bippa the Broken, and this is my new YouTube channel. Uh, I highly doubt anyone will ever see this, but it's mainly just for reference if I don't know, maybe if I ever look back on these days. So basically, I'm going to be talking about my therapeutic experiences in a series of videos. It's going to be biased, I'm just going to say that now, because, I mean, I was the one going through it, and there's obviously a different side of the whole thing. Uh, and you obviously, I'm not the best source of information for this. You should look stuff up yourself, do research, and all that. But I'm just gonna tell you the story of how I got gooned and what I think led up to that point and why I don't think it's right. Um, well, first let me explain what it actually is. Most of you probably haven't heard of it. If anyone hears this again, fuck. But basically, gooning is okay. Well, first let me. God, basically, gooning is okay, fine, let me just go here. I had issues growing up, or well, okay, fine. As a teenager, I had issues. I mean, everyone did. But I definitely did have issues. I recognize that now, even a mere year after it's happened. I am 15 as of the making of this video, and I was 14 as of the time I first entered Blue Ridge. But basically, the main problems leading up to it were quite obvious in retrospect. I was truant for 3 weeks straight. Bad idea. Don't ever fucking do it. Yeah, that's just missing school, by the way, if you don't know that. But yeah, other than that, it's just a long years before prior of history of being incredibly rude to my parents for really selfish and unwarranted reasons. I've called my mother horrible names. My father is I don't even know. But yeah, I've done some horrible things throughout my life, so my relatively short life so far. And I am not proud of them, and I don't really know what to do about them. But basically, yes. So I was incredibly rude to my parents. I hated the school system, like not just like your average teenager, everyone hates the school system. I actually refused to partake in it, just flat out getting zeros and being perfectly, well, not okay with that because it had other consequences, but I did not give a shit about my grades. So, yeah. So I didn't give a shit about school. I was just a dick to my parents in general. And it all culminated in one day I ran away for 3 hours. It was quite pathetic looking back on it. It was actually one of the rare days I didn't have an argument with my parents, and it's not a fond memory. Uh, I'm still not entirely like. I think I was just fucking confused. I don't really know. It sounds weird trying to justify it. It was dumb. It was a really stupid decision. Basically, I packed a school lunch, my phone, a battery pack, some chargers, and some clothing. And I, for some reason, thought I just, I don't know, I just walked out the door. It's kind of hard to, looking back on it, it's kind of hard to explain exactly why I did it. I don't know. I think I just thought myself into a hole of like, doesn't really matter. Or maybe I can just get away. Not even that, really. I didn't have a goal in mind. I just flat out packed shit up and walked out the door. Um, my parents were literally out sitting on the porch of our house at the time, and they must have noticed like in less than an hour or two, because as I said, I was only gone for 3 hours total. And in that time, well, I left at like 6 p.m., so it was already getting kind of dark after like the first hour. I was literally just walking on the sidewalk. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I was in a fit of just depression, I think, but I don't really know. I'm not qualified in any of sort of regard. But uh, anyway, so yeah, like it started getting dark after like 2 hours or so. I've I live in Cleveland, so it's not the nicest neighborhoods. Uh, yeah, I found myself in a pretty shady neighborhood, and I started questioning what the fuck I was gonna do for the night as it was getting dark, and realization finally started to set on me that I had no idea what I was doing. And yeah, okay. As a result, shit. Okay, that was a really weird cut. Fuck. But as a result, yeah. Okay. So as a result, yeah, I realized I just had no idea what I was doing. So eventually, I called my parents out of sight of it, and I agreed to meet at a McDonald's. Like that was like down the street from our house. I actually ended up going in a big circle. I was using Google Maps on an iPad to try to just get as far away from the house as possible. However, when I eventually started going back to the house, thinking maybe I could just slip back in without them noticing. Yeah, that was not. I was out of luck on that regard. Um, yeah, okay. I started heading back to the house, and however, like I was fucking tired. I was anxious. I was sweating. I was in a hoodie. It was pretty cold out, but like I was my hoodie was covered in sweat because I was fucking so anxious about the whole thing. And eventually, I got so tired, I flat out just called my parents. Who actually no, I just checked my phone, and my aunts had called me. My parents had left messages, text messages, stuff along the lines of like, where are you? We're not judging. My aunt sent messages and stuff, and yeah, I ended up just calling them, and um, yeah, I called them, and I said that I was near. I told them where I was, and they said to meet up to go to a McDonald's just up the street. I went there, and there was a police cruiser. I think that's what they're called. Uh, yeah, as I first showed up, a police cruiser came by and rolled down the window saying like, "Are you Jacob? Are you Jacob Lucci?" I said, "Yeah." I was a little surprised they got the police involved, although I guess it makes sense looking back on it. Um, and So yeah, I got into the cruiser with him. It was really freaking awkward, I'll tell you that much. Uh, yeah, but anyway, I drove back home, and there were two other officers there, and I had to talk with one of them. He handed me this, just like how it's illegal to leave your house without telling your parents, or especially in the manner that I did. Uh, and okay, maybe Uh, but yeah, anyway, okay, he told me it was illegal. He handed me a little call card that I still have, but I've never used. Um, and it kind of went on my criminal record. I think it's really weird. I don't have access to this sort of stuff. I'm only 15. I'm a teenager after all. Still am. So, um, uh, but yeah, I got a little off track there, didn't I? I was supposed to be talking about gooning. Okay, whatever. This video is probably no one's gonna watch this anyway. That's whatever. Who cares a shit if it's like 20 minutes? Anyway, so yeah, okay. So yeah, I ran away. It was pathetic, and I never really offered any explanation to my parents. After the police left, I just walked into my room, slammed the door, and went to bed. We just didn't really talk about it for the next 3 weeks or so, and this was like right near the end of the school year. So yeah, we didn't really speak of it for the next 3 weeks. At least not that I remember. Again, my memory is probably making some inconsistencies in what actually happened. But um but yeah, so roughly 3 weeks later, I also I had a crippling tech addiction. Like even I admit that. And by that I just mean I played stupid amounts of video games, like an unhealthy amount that even I can admit. And I still kind of do, not the quite the same degree, but it's most certainly unhealthy what I did then, and less so, but still unhealthy what I do now. So, yeah, I had like really bad video game addiction where I didn't even play like I didn't even really play video games for fun anymore. Like I just played Call of Duty a lot. That was one of the big ones, and also plenty of other games. And I had gamer rage where like just I smashed at least 10 headsets. Uh, um, but yeah, I just had a horrible gamer rage, and sorry for the awkward cuts. It's because I'm doing this in 5 minute intervals because I'm really bad at editing. Uh, it's also just lazy, and it's mostly just so I can see what happened, what I was thinking at this time, I guess. But yeah, okay, so yeah, I broke shit. I had gamer rage, and whenever my parents like I would do this, I would just constant video games. It was my life. It was the only thing. I didn't even really enjoy it, but it was the only thing I did. So like, my parents would be having a Browns party, and and I would just be in my room, and then I'd die in Call of Duty or something like that, and I just fucking bash my keyboard against the wall, breaking it in the process, making everyone in the house uncomfortable. And eventually, it's like often my parents would come in and try to ask me to like play a different game or like flat out just take the internet away. They had one of those apps where you could just turn it off and on for certain devices. But that would just make me like it would just direct my anger at them and make it me fuck do horrible things. I've called my mother the worst names on like I know. Um, it doesn't make me proud, but I have done it, and it's kind of fucked up. But so I can understand, but yeah, it was incredibly ineffective way of dealing with my anger, and I feel guilt for this. I don't really. So okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is I can understand why my parents thought sending me to a wilderness program or to therapeutic treatment was necessary. Um, and I definitely I had issues. And so okay, let me actually explain what um let me actually explain what gooning is now, as it's kind of the original purpose of this video. Um, Basically, imagine you're a parent and you've decided you're going to send your kid, or you're going to send your kid to a therapeutic program, whatever that program may be. You've signed them up, you've paid the money. Now all that's left to do is actually send your kid to the program. So parents generally go about this in one of three ways. I'm sure there are exceptions, and please note I'm speaking from my experience in Blue Ridge Therapeutic Wilderness. If like you went to a different wilderness, it might have been completely different. I have no real way of knowing. Well, I guess I do, but I'm not gonna research it because I'm lazy as fuck. But um but yeah, basically in my wilderness at least, parents generally went about getting their kids to the program in one of three ways. The first, and it was uncommon but not unheard of, actually like telling your kids they're gonna go to a therapeutic wilderness or there's nothing they can do about it, or again whatever therapeutic program. It's not just the wildernesses; it's other places too. Um, but yeah, like just telling your kid they're going to the program, whether that there's nothing they can do about it, and yeah, they just get in the car and let's go. This event proved awkward because these, from what I can tell at least, wildernesses are heavily centralized in certain states. Utah has a fuck ton. I went to one, although I went to one in Georgia, and I live in Ohio, so that's like a 10-hour drive and a hour and a half flight. Um, but again, it was different for other kids. There were some local Georgians there, but because of this, like you would have kids from all over the country in one climate that they're usually not used to. Uh, anyway, again, I've got off track. So as I was saying, they would. So yeah, the first strategy was parents would just tell their kid they were going, and depending on the kid, this worked. It did. The kids are never happy about it, from what I can gather. There is also the rare student that actually like wants to go to therapy. Um, that was certainly the oddity, at least in the camp I went to. But usually it's their parents. So this one usually doesn't go well, especially if you got like a long car ride or plane ride to deal with, because kids don't want to fucking go. They're scared. They always are. The second, uh, the second, the second strategy I saw a lot of. This one was more common. Um, Still not exactly. Well, yeah, it was more common, but still not the main one. Um, this was usually some form of trickery. I met multiple different kids who their parents would tell them something along the lines of, "Hey, we're going to Starbucks," or something like that, McDonald's. And once the kid was basically a hostage in the car, there's obviously not much they can do about it. And then their parent, like, the kid starts realizing that the car ride's taking way longer than it should. Start asking questions. They get a little nervous. Usually, then the parents would tell them they're going to a therapeutic wilderness camp. This strategy is more of it's way more of a slap in the face. Don't get me wrong, they're all just giant slaps in the face. Like, the initial reaction, well, at least my initial reaction and what I imagine most other kids were, was, well, just flat out shock. Like, the disbelief in the first few moments. And then you immediately start trying to talk your way out of it, having no way of knowing, even if your parents directly tell you, you don't really care. Not really knowing or not really caring that your parents have already made the decisions, they've paid the forms, they've paid the money, they've invested a whole lot into this program already, and nothing you can say or do is going to change that, except for maybe like extreme drastic actions, which will just get you sent to a far, far worse program. Um, but so um, yeah, okay, that's the summary, I guess. But in the third program, and the one I was subjected to, at least during my first day in wilderness, was gooning. Uh, it's not. I, I've learned now. Uh, Later, I learned that gooning is a little bit racist, and a goon is a kind of a sort of a racial slur for black people. I think I'm not too sure about it. I do know it's bad though, but we do it. We knew that. We were told that pretty swiftly by staff members. Um, and we used it anyway, and I'm gonna use it anyway. It's not like I guess I can't really defend it too much. I mean, yeah, it is racist. There's not much defending that. But we don't really say it because we want to be racist. We say it because fuck adults. That's why. Um, I don't know. It's not much of a justification, and I get that. But yeah, we're gonna call it gooning. So yeah. Um, yeah. So anyway, this is basically where there are transport companies. I don't know too much about the actual business side of it, but I do know there are companies where they offer a service to parents who want to ship their kids somewhere but don't want to like put them in the car ride or anything like that. So what they do is they pay these companies money, and the company sends what we call goons to the house, and they literally they ask the kid to come, and if the kid's often confused, I remember in my particular experience, I went just gone through an all-nighter of playing Call of Duty, and I was sleep deprived as fuck, still in pajamas. Um, and I remember I heard it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. My sleep schedule was completely out of whack. So it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I hear my parents moving around out in the living room, and I think that's weird because, they're not usually awake at that time. So I go out and I just find them sitting on the couch, and it's a little weird, but I don't really question it. I get into a conversation with my dad about like Black Ops 3 and stuff. He plays video games too a little bit. But and then all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, two people walk into the room, a man and a woman. Um, the guy's kind of short, woman's well, he's tall. No, the dude is tall. Yeah, that's what I was. He was tall. He had a mustache. I don't know why I'm describing him. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, he was. Uh, and yeah. So yeah. Anyway, these two people just show up in my house. I'm like, oh, what are you guys? It was weird. It was. I'm like, what the hell? What are they doing here? I asked my parents, and at this point, it's yeah. So my parents are mostly silent about it, and like they just kind of sit there and look down. Again, this is probably slightly inaccurate. It was a year ago, and I was very anxious. It's a dark memory, and I don't really. I'm sure I'm misremembering some portions of this. Um, but my parents sort of said like I love you, like we love you, and then they just walked into their room, and I was just then it was just me and the two goons. Um, yeah, and I remember I'm like, wait, what? I was still really confused, and they're like, the goons, they talk about like, they just basically like say the basic news of, yeah, you're gonna sent to a place where you, uh, um, fuck, I don't really remember, but okay. Basically, they just said stuff along the lines of like, you're gonna be sent to a therapeutic program. And I obviously say stuff like I don't really want to go, and like no, I'm not. Uh, um, yeah, I was a stubborn little brat, but yeah. So I just like flat out say no, and then they make it clear it's not really an option, and I don't really listen. Eventually, I asked, like I'm holding my iPad. I was watching YouTube as I was talking to my dad, and I asked like, can I bring my iPad? And they say no, because they'd probably just take it away when I got there, stuff like that. Again, I'm probably misremembering some of this, but eventually I just full out panic, and what they're saying starts to sink in a little bit, and I panic. Okay, I don't really know what I was thinking. I just literally tried to run past them. Like I was like our couch is in like a sort of corner of the room, and I sort of like tried to, and yeah, I was standing near the couch, and they were blocking the way out of the living room. So I sort of tried to like just run past them, and uh, one of they tackled me to, well, not really tackled, but like they grappled me to the ground, and then I was on the ground with two of them on me, and I was trying to uh just real like escape their hands, and yeah. Um, but So yeah, after like I don't know, like 2 minutes of just crawling around on the ground where I'm like trying to shake them off, and I even bit the woman at one point. Not hard. I ended up doing more damage to myself than them. I gave myself a bloody nose by hitting my face on the ground too hard. Um, yeah, and um, yeah, it was just sheer panic, and I was not thinking clearly. Um, again, yeah, we're just gonna move on. Anyway, so they put me in handcuffs. They handcuffed my legs and hands together. Um, uh, and then we go out to a red minivan that was parked in the driveway, which is why that's the background for the video, by the way. Um, and because I violently resisted, as they put it, so maybe that's not how they phrased it, but basically because I was violent and sort of, I resisted physically. We weren't allowed to take they canceled the airplane trip that I was going to take down to Georgia. So the result was a 10-hour drive from Cleveland, Ohio to Atlanta, Georgia. Well, not quite Atlanta, just north of Atlanta, but basically Atlanta. And well, I was in handcuffs. I wasn't in handcuffs for the full time, but for like the first 3 hours, I was just sitting in silence in the back of the car. Um, and yeah, I had a bloody nose. They cleaned it up a little bit, and yeah. Um, so yeah, like they put like the woman put like a rag to my nose to like help clean it up a bit, and so like 3 hours goes by while I'm just sitting. My handcuffs are behind me, by the way. And if you've ever had the displeasure of being handcuffed in a car with your handcuffs with your hands handcuffed behind your back, you know it's not fun on the wrist. It's quite painful. Um, and uh, so yeah. Geez, sorry for the delays. It's just trying to get my thoughts together. But yeah. So after like 3 hours of this, we stop at a gas station to go to the bathroom and buy some like water bottles and stuff for the long drive. And at one point, they both left the car. Like they were both in the grocery store while I was still handcuffed and shackled in the back. Um, but and I remember like seriously considering like banging my like raising my hands, which were like trying to raise my legs up to the window so people could see it, banging on the window and shut like hey, I'm being kidnapped. Because those were kind of the thoughts that were going through my head at the time. I eventually didn't though, after a lot, because I was worried that they'd have like some license or something that was saying that they were allowed to do it, because I figured they probably were almost certainly allowed to do it because they were doing it. So, um, I didn't. And after like we drove out of the gas station, and after like another hour in the car and a bit of negotiating with them, and they took off. They replaced. They took off the leg shackles and allowed me to move my handcuffs in front of me instead of like put them on my hands on my lap, which were still handcuffed, but in my lap instead of behind my back. And and yeah, so we did that after like, and then I sat the rest of the a good bit of the rest of the car. Another hour or two passes, and I eventually get the handcuffs removed entirely. At this point, I'm just kind of sitting in the back of the car, just thinking, I guess. It's kind of a blur, to be honest. The whole thing is, yeah. Um, yeah, it's really just a giant blur. And, so yeah. Um, but, anyway, after a 10-hour drive, which, right before we got to Atlanta, we stopped at this doctor's office, because I had to get, uh, what's the term? Like for when you're trying to try out for a sport, you have to first get a medical checkup to make sure like you're physically, you're not gonna hurt yourself while doing it. Yeah, I had to get one of those for the program. Uh, and we have to wait in line like at this little checkup place for like an hour and a half, like just sitting in the stools, and it was pretty awkward, I'll tell you that. Anyway, eventually we get through everything. The doctor says I passed the examination, and that we drive the rest of. We were originally going to stay in a hotel, but I guess like stay in a hotel for the night, and then I get sent to they drive me the rest of the way to the camp in the morning. But I don't know. They just decided to just take me there late at night, and get me there really late instead of doing that. So um, they drove me down to the base camp of the program, which It's just this really large building off this like on this little side road. Um, yeah, they drive me down. I go in. Um, and yeah, like I walk into the building and immediately I go into a room on the left. This room it has like a bench in it. Like yeah, it's like two benches, and then two guys show up and they do inventory, I think they called it. Basically where like they make sure you don't smuggle stuff in and stuff and um it's basically so they made me take off my clothing one piece at a time and while they were watching and it was most certainly awkward. Uh, um yeah, so yeah, after that awkward process, they gave me the gear that I was gonna get that I was gonna be wearing for my duration of this day. Well, okay, not entirely. They did laundry and did replacements and all that, but like basically we had two sets of clothing, or like I think it was like three sets. Uh, and like you had to do on and off again laundry, where you gave them one set one week and then you wore the next set for a week. And okay, I can get into that later. I can get into that in a later video, I suppose. But basically, they gave me the clothing and all the gear I was supposed to get. Had me sign a couple forms, it's like saying like telling like just signing, putting my signature saying that I got everything. And it was a little weird because I specifically remember them telling me um like you have to, like here sign this form to say that you got everything, but you don't actually need to check. Make sure we like it's our job to make sure you got everything, so you did. Don't worry about it. And I'm fairly confident I did, but it definitely was a little awkward at the time, and it probably still sounds like that now. They also make you sign like this sort of I don't really know what to call it, the agreement, I guess, where basically it says like I will follow all the rules of the program, despite at that point I didn't even know what all the rules were. But yeah, it's basically just like this like 5-page long document, um, where like yeah, it just basically says like you sign it and it just like agreeing, putting your signature down on a form that says you will follow all the rules of the program. Uh, that's another complaint I have, which I'll get into in a later video if I ever make any. But but yeah, um, so yeah. Anyway, then I had to do like there was so much paperwork. I don't even remember all of it. But then they gave me like they gave me like a paper test of it's basically like I think it was some official therapeutic document. I don't know what it was called, but basically, you just asked questions about your mental state, told you to answer honestly. I mean, most people have probably done something sort of similar. Where like, yeah, just like they ask a bunch of questions like, have you ever done drugs and alcohol? Have you ever, done anything illegal? Have you ever stolen anything? Do you hear things? Do you see things? Um, yeah, they just ask all these questions. Like, there was like, God, there was like 200 questions about like I guess it was supposed to gauge like your mental state or something, because that's certainly what it seemed like at least. I answered mostly honestly, except for the parts where no one does stuff like stuff like how often like do you lie very often. Uh, yeah, totally not lying when I say never. I've barely ever lie. It's yeah, but um. Anyway, eventually we go through all the paperwork. We Yeah. So eventually we got through all the paperwork. Then I got into another car to go to the actual base camp. There were like 10 different base camps in this program alone, but I was assigned to G3. And so I got into another car with a completely different staff, two completely different staff to yeah, to drive up to the actual base camp, which was in the woods. So if you've never been, if you've never been on the roads north of Atlanta, like not like I mean quite far north to Atlanta, like to the point where it's pretty much bordering North Carolina and Georgia. It's in, I believe that it was Rabun County is the name of the actual location. Like spelled Rabun. But yeah, that was the actual region. And if you ever if you've ever been there, the work, especially some of the dirt roads that we ended up driving on, it's incredibly twisty. There are points where the roads are maintained, but not very well. You Yeah, it's just like driving backcountry. Like I'm sure you probably haven't done it in that specific region, but I know, if you've ever driven like really backcountry roads where like the roads are dirt, um, and they're constantly twisting and turning, and you have to like, sometimes you even have to drag branches out of the road, if the Forest Service didn't get. Um, so yeah, but yeah. So eventually we did get to the base camp. It took like 40 hours of driving down or not 40 hours, 40 minutes of driving down those sort of backcountry roads. And once we got there, I remember, I guess I was expecting, like, I heard it was like a boarding program, but like, because the goons are allowed to, like, I guess, yeah, they're obviously allowed to, but what they do is they lie about, they obviously don't want to get physical with the people they're sending to the programs. So what they do is they try to make it sound better than it actually is, and they just flat out lie about it. Like, I was told that, like, before I got physical, when they were still trying to convince me the peaceful way to go to to just willingly go to the program, they said things along the lines of there was a computer lab, and that was one thing they pointed out specifically. They, yeah, and it's honestly funny looking back on it because it's literally just a camp in the woods. They also just, yeah, they made, like, I remember I asked about if there was cabins, and they said yes. Uh, yeah, they just flat out lied about a lot of things. And yeah, it was quite a slap in the face when I walked, like, okay, two staff walked out to the car on the road because the bases aren't like right off the road, they're in the woods a little bit. You often have to hike a minute or two to get to them. Um, so two staff came down from the main group, and they introduced themselves, and we went up the road after I grabbed my giant bag. If you ever seen a hiking bag, it's like that. But yeah, I forget. Yeah. Um, and then we walk up this like little beaten dirt road, and I remember I was like, huh, this is a weird path to go to get to like cabins and whatever. I walk up and I see like there's like this tarp. Like we finally reach the camp, and it's literally just I remember I see that one of the staff doing bear hang, which I'll probably explain in more detail in another video. Um, all the students were doing that in the mid, like it was really late at night. Like it was like 6 o'clock, already turning kind of dark. And right after, like, I had no idea what was going on. The staff walked up and took the food out of my bag, and then they put that in bear hang. And I was really confused. I'm like, huh, that's literally just a tarp. Like, where's the actual camp? And um, yeah, I guess I had never, yeah, I had never before this point, I had never spent any meaningful time camping. Like, I was not a camping kid. Um, like the closest I've ever come to camping is like, like that in your backyard with your phone and internet access and all that crap. I had never before done true camping, like especially not the type of crap they do in wilderness programs. So I was fully expecting there to be like actual like air conditioned buildings and stuff. And I was in for a harsh slap in the face. Where like yeah, there was also like this it was like a gigantic rain tarp that was tied to six different trees. Well, actually, it was like eight different trees, but it was just because it was big. and all the kids sat around it, and they did like a group circle where the second newest kid, whose name was Ryan, uh, he read I forget, it was a book called, I think it was like called The Four Agreements or something. I think that was the title. He read like two chapters of that while we were all sitting around a campfire, and I was just remarkably confused. I had no idea what was going on. I like anxiously introduced myself and then just stayed quiet for the rest of for quite a bit after that. Um, Eventually, though, I was told it was time to go to shelters and that I would be sleeping under staff tarp. I, of course, had no idea what that meant at the time, but so yeah, we all walked up, and I'm like, oh, okay, fine, well, we're going to the cabins. Uh, and of course, we weren't. We were walking up. We walked up another slight. We walked down to a different sort of campsite where it was just it was like 10 tarps and then like 10 small tarps. Well, actually, no, it was like nine because there was like 9 kids in the group at the time. And then there was the one big tarp which the staff slept under. I Because it was my first night, I had to sleep under staff tarp, which meant uh, that I like had to sleep next to four grown adults, which is not something I had ever done before. And also, I would be sleeping in the wilderness, like literally the only thing keeping me off the ground is a ground tarp, a little foam pad, and the sleeping bag outdoors. I had never done that before, and uh, and another feature of sleeping under staff tarp is that you had to get rolled up, I think is what they referred to it as, where it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. They take an extra tarp, which they always have. They take an extra tarp and they just roll that on top of you until like you're completely rolled in a tarp. The reason for this is like it's basically impossible to get up out of the tarp without making a ridiculous amount of noise, which makes it really hard to run away in the night. Um, at least not without waking staff up. And so yeah, at this point I was still kind of in like not shell shock is definitely not the appropriate term, but like just shock from the whole day. Um, I was still confused. My brain still hadn't processed exactly what this meant. Um, I kind of assumed that like my parents would just like the next maybe like it was getting late, so I was starting to realize I wasn't gonna leave tonight. But I was starting to think like my parents like might like the next night just show up and say like, "Hey, just kidding. Like we're sorry. It was a mistake." I kind of had like those were kind of the thoughts going through my mind, even though weren't really logical. Um, so it was really awkward. Like I had never slept in the wilderness before, so I was worried about things like a spider just walking into my mouth while I was asleep. So I didn't end up falling asleep for like a solid 2 hours after everyone else did. And eventually exhaustion, like I was incredibly anxious throughout the entire day, so just emotional exhaustion eventually just knocked me out. But before I fell asleep that first night, I remember I'm like, this is so fucked up. I swear I will never sleep under another tarp again, and that I would find a way out of there tomorrow. Yeah, that didn't happen. And this I'm really in this video I just kind of want to cover like the introduction to these programs. I'm probably gonna make more videos. I doubt anyone's gonna watch this, but and I'm sorry for the incredibly poor editing. Uh, for this first video at least, I'm not gonna like cut out all the weird bits where it's just me stammering and trying to think about what I'm gonna say. Uh, if you're not me and you're watching this, then go ahead and feel free to leave in the comments below, like if you want me to make like a more better edited version where I try to cut out all the stammery bits and like make it more on topic because I know I go off on some tangents in this video. It also is just ridiculously long. I could probably tell the story in like 5 minutes, and this is a 45-minute video. But yeah. Uh if anyone actually wants to see an edited version, then I can probably make that. However, am on a serious time constraint because I am currently on my Christmas visit from BMA, which is not it's not the same thing as Blue Ridge, but it's another therapeutic program, and I will be going back in a couple days. So I might be able to push out another video before I leave, but if I don't, then there won't be another upload for a minimum a month. Likely more if I can't get a home visit. I'll probably just get a regional visit, which again I can explain in later videos if there are any. So if you are listening to this, well, uh, hi, and I hope you like my sob story. Okay. Um, yeah, all right, that's